Well, it's been 3 years since Britain left the EU after years of acrimonious infighting over the 2016 referendum result.
The former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, won a barnstorming majority off the back of the result, with Labour scrambling to keep the party together.
But how times have changed. A recent poll by Unheard indicates that almost all British constituencies believe we were wrong to exit the European Union. So was Brexit a mistake? We're now joined by former Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, as well as former leader of the Brexit Party and GB News presenter, Nigel Farage. Both of you, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Nigel, perhaps I could start with you, because we had this Unheard poll showed that 54% of the country agreed that Britain was wrong to leave the EU and only 28% disagreed. So it seems the majority now think leaving the EU was a mistake. What would you say to those people?
Well, it was a mistake to leave the European Union exit in the hands of something called the Conservative Party. They never believed in it from the start. They dragged their heels. We were put through 3 years of total misery. I mean, old Bercow here helped make it more difficult than it had to be. But the truth of it is, you know, I mean, to me, 3 years ago this week, we moved house, right? And there were lots of new rooms and lots of excitement. But to make it work, we had to be truly dynamic and make real change. And the truth is, most of those packing boxes are still there. I mean, even little wins, like removing the 5% minimum VAT that Europe demanded on our domestic energy bills, even things like that haven't been done. So what the polling shows is disenchantment. You know, and if you ask me right now, am I disappointed with Brexit? I'm sorry to say, I'm going to have to say yes. So the government have made an absolute pig's ear of the whole thing in purely economic terms. Right. Now, the sovereignty argument's simple. We're self-governing. There are no excuses. We've won back the birthright to mismanage our own country, and we're doing a jolly good job of that. We have our own foreign policy.
I mean, it's easy to point the blame elsewhere, but do you think when the debate was going on, people should have been a little bit more honest and realistic about the time it would take to move on? Because certain things have happened. You're not paying into the EU budget, you've got freedom of your own laws, you've not got freedom of movement. The big things have happened, but those other things you're talking about, should you as well, when you were championing it, be a little bit more honest about the time scale?
Yes, we should have triggered Article 50 on the 24th of June 2016. It should have been done immediately. If we'd done that, there wouldn't have been time for the Remainer, the second referendum, the mega whinge campaign. We should have got on with the job. We have done none of those things. And, you know, there are 5.5 million men and women in this country running small businesses. They expected to see relief from excessive regulation. It'll be 7 years in a couple of months' time since that vote, and as yet they've seen nothing. So look, it's been horribly mishandled. I don't think there's any chance of it being reversed in terms of us joining. But I do feel that the next Labour government will probably keep us very tightly aligned to single market rules. And in the economic side of the argument, we just won't get the benefits. And it's very disappointing.
John, if I can bring you in here. I mean, Nigel's case is pretty much that it's not really Brexit that's at fault. It's the Conservative government that's implemented it, and perhaps people in Parliament, aided and abetted by you, who tried to frustrate it. But look, you know, we were told that within weeks of voting to leave the EU, the economy would collapse. We'd need a punishment budget.
Old Project Fear.
Exactly. It didn't really happen, did it? What the people who campaigned for Remain said didn't. It might not have gone as well as Nigel thought, but it hasn't gone as badly as people said it would, has it?
Well, it's gone very badly indeed. I'm not going to be held responsible for what George Osborne did or didn't say or imply at the time. That isn't within my bailiwick. What I would say to Nigel, who's a cheeky chappie, he's an amiable rogue, some would say an incorrigible scoundrel.
So are you as well, John.
He does remind me of university days when one used to debate with members of the Socialist Workers' Party. And when they lambasted capitalism, international capitalism, global capitalism, those of us who took a different view would say, well, look at socialism. Look at the evidence in practice in the Soviet Union, to which they responded. They were a constantly moving target, saying, no, that's not real socialism. That's a distortion. That's debauch. That's state capitalism. With Nigel, instead of taking it on the chin and recognising that, in fact, to date, it has been a grotesque blunder and the biggest foreign policy mistake of the post-war period, what Nigel wants to do, because he can't abandon the religiosity of his lifelong support for Brexit, is to blame someone else. So it's mysterious forces. It's, if you like, a fifth or sixth estate. It's those Machiavellian types working night and day to frustrate the will of the British people or the designs of Farage. I mean, really, it is nonsense on stilts, Nigel. And to be honest, I say to you in all politeness and candour, you can do a bit better than that. Why not start by admitting, first, that people are poorer, wages are down. Foreign direct investment has slumped. Sterling has taken a permanent 10% hit. The economy has been hit to the tune of about 100 billion.
Okay, well, let's bring Nigel in for some of the... Because other people might say COVID had that impact. So let's bring Nigel in.
Remember what Brexit's about. Remember the big point of Brexit is to be a self-governing democratic nation. And that means you can get things right and you can get things wrong. All right, very simple, as opposed to the vast majority of our law, and certainly in commercial law, 80% of it being made somewhere else over which we have little say. So we're in charge. We can't blame Brussels anymore. But the point is, it's never a mistake for a country to be independent, sovereign and free. That is never, ever a mistake. My complaint is that the party that was given the job of carrying it out didn't actually believe in it. We started off with a negotiation that was always going to give us a rubbish deal. And there's so much more we can do. And you know, John, until last year, we were actually the fastest growing economy in the G7. Wages in the first 3 or 4 years after Brexit did go up quite appreciably. Now, you know, on economics, we can argue till the cows come home about whether it's hurt us, whether it's benefited us. My argument is this, that Brexit needed supply-side reform to maximise the potential benefits. That's about us becoming more competitive than our European neighbours. And we haven't done it. So my complaint, no conspiracy.
John, let me
he's just about concluding. Nigel, I've listened carefully and with respect to that thesis, but what I say to you is this. It's one thing to excoriate Theresa May, or indeed before her David Cameron, by saying, well, neither of them was a believer in Brexit, and that would be true. I think she did her honest, plodding, inadequate, grossly unimaginative best, to be fair to her, but I accept that she presided over the matter in political terms with absolutely crass ineptitude. Where your argument seems to me to be on very difficult ground is that you can't very well lacerate Boris Alexander de Pfeffel on the same front. Boris Johnson came out explicitly in support of Brexit. He wanted Brexit. He favoured Brexit. He championed Brexit. He wanted, in fact, a Brexit not dissimilar to that which you support. And so if you argue the case, Nigel, as I know you would want candidly to do, fairly and honestly, look at Brexit under Bojo, not under May or Cameron or these secret Remainers or Ramoners, and it has been a terrible failure.
John, let me come in. John, let me just ask you a question here.
Allow Philip to be the speaker.
How can you be so sure that Brexit has failed? I mean, literally, we left the EU 3 years ago. Within 6 weeks, we'd got a COVID pandemic where the government, ridiculously in my opinion, but they locked down the country for 2 years, the economy. They literally paid people to do nothing. Clearly, there was going to be a massive economic consequence from locking down the economy. We're facing the consequences now of that, the spike in demand and the huge inflation that followed, the war in Ukraine with energy prices. We haven't really seen the evidence of Brexit, have we? Because everything has been coloured by what happened over COVID. So you're saying that because of everything collapsed during the lockdown, it's all Brexit's fault. It's not, is it?
I think that, if you'll forgive me saying so, and even frankly, Philip, if you won't, I would say that that is an act of self-delusion on your part. As you know, I've always given you the highest brownie points for your extreme candour, both in the chamber and outside. Look, of course.
Well, I'm going to join in with Philip here. I'm going to join in with, because I absolutely, locking the world down for 2 years has a significant impact, and you can't throw that away. Over to you, John.
Esther, I don't disagree with either of you or indeed with Nigel if he were to say that COVID has had a deleterious impact. That, I think, is an incontestable fact about which we can quickly agree and move on. The issue is this. Given that very large numbers of other countries right across the world were negatively affected by COVID as well, how have they bounced back? It is a chronic state of affairs and a searing, coruscating indictment of Brexit that nearly 2 years after the worst of it, we are predicted in 2024, Nigel, by the OECD to be the worst performing economy of all. Now, I think if you're going to operate in the spirit of fairness, you have to say you can't blame that on COVID. So no doubt Nigel will retreat into his right-wing lager and say, no, it's the fault of the Remoaners. They are becoming
Hang on, John, let Nigel get a word in.
Brexit did not force this government into giving us the highest tax burden in 70 years, productivity that is 20% below that of France. I mean, I can't believe it. I've never seen a Frenchman work, and yet our productivity is lower than theirs. We have made a hash of this. But I will say this to you. Because of Brexit, we've signed the AUKUS deal with Australia, a very significant, important foreign policy development. Because of Brexit, we've taken the lead in Ukraine. Now, you can agree or disagree with that position, but it wouldn't have happened as members of a European Union. Because of Brexit, we were able to get a quick, fast, effective vaccine rollout, whilst the rest of Europe was waiting for some woman from Cyprus who hadn't even been elected to make decisions.
We had a very successful rollout of the vaccine because of exemplary conduct by suppliers and British public servants.
John, let Nigel finish. John,
let Nigel finish. We'll come back to you. We will come back to you, John.
Be my guest, but unfortunately, you suffer from the disadvantage of being wrong.
We haven't rewarded Brexit voters and much of working class Britain with the genuine rewards that could have come. And I go back to that point. Just taking the 5% VAT off domestic fuel would have been a very clear Brexit win. But the big one, and this is what no one wants to talk about, and as I speak to you, I'm looking over the English Channel. All right? Now, there were no dinghies today, but on many days I can see them from this very room. We voted, millions of extra people turned out in that referendum who don't normally vote. And they did it to get back control of our borders and to reduce the numbers coming into Britain. That has been a catastrophe. And that has nothing to do with Brexit. It's actually to do with the Tory government and the fact we haven't completed Brexit by leaving
the PCH. We're going to have to end it there because we're running out of time.
John, listen to that. And I understand your strength of feeling, and I don't dispute.
John, you can't just keep talking.
Let me put it to you like this and see.
Okay, well, if we just cut them both off, we've now got to go to the break.
John,
we should have a round two.
John, can I just ask? John,
extra week for the National Health Service.
Okay,
John, please.
Oh, John, please, can we cut John off now if he's not going to cut himself off?